Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk on one of my favorite topics, and that's what AI means in health. So let's hit right off the bat with a number, 1970. So this was the first example of AI in health. Mycin could classify blood diseases given data. So what have we been doing the last 50 years? Why 50 years later are we suddenly talking about, hey, why don't we bring AI into health, right? And I think as insight to that, it's in the title, rules-based expert systems. So we assembled physicians and experts who had to build this model, afterwards which you could bring data and get a classification. But enter 2020, the age of big data, the age of big compute. Chris Bishop talked a little bit on this topic. And now what we want to be able to do is, rather than a human expert specify these in a data-driven way, have the machines able to learn what rules are needed to make a prediction. And we have the luxury in health, actually, and perhaps the necessity of having what is perhaps the pinnacle of complexity in the entire universe, and that's an individual human. And we have 8 billion of us on the planet. And in health, we have this wonderful holistic view with all these different data types generated by this complex system, right? And so how are we going to bring all of these together, and will we need to do that? Now, you might ask, well, isn't this a little bit much? Do we really need to be using AI and all of this data in pharma? You've been doing this for decades. And the answer is yes, pharma is hard. So you screen on a target maybe millions of compounds, you're going to make 10,000 compounds. And by the end, just to get 0.1 new drugs, because 90% of them fail anyway. And this whole process costs billions of dollars, and it takes 10 to 15 years. So anything we can do to speed up this process, to make it more efficient, to reduce the failures, especially when it's due to toxicity, is going to immediately benefit the patient and make people's lives better. Now, Shahram yesterday talked a little bit about the process that needs to happen in order to generate a new therapy in pharma, but let's look under the hood a little bit, actually. And so I like to think of the pipeline as more of a wheel. And so to understand what the opportunities are, we need to think about what are the data sets and what are we trying to predict. So if we start with disease pathology, think omics, imaging, cellular assays. Basically, we want to understand what's driving a disease. We want to identify a new actionable target. Once we have that target, we're now in this therapeutic molecule space. So, we have a huge amount of data on compounds and chemical data, screening data. So can we use this to design safer, more efficient therapies, optimize our processes? Once we have that therapy, now we're in clinical trials. Can we pair these new digital endpoints, Fitbits and whatnot, with clinical observables, medical imaging data, basically find the ideal patients and do this faster, create endpoints that are more meaningful to patients and in real life settings, and do this safer as well. If you're fortunate enough to be in that 0.1, the 10% that get approval, now you want to understand what this therapy is going to mean to a real life patient. So we have you're looking at electronic health records, medical records, social and lifestyle data. We can better find underdiagnosed patient populations, understand patient journeys, disease progression, and ultimately predict who's going to respond to a given treatment. Because if you can predict who's going to respond, you can predict who's not going to respond, right? You can look for the commonalities in these patients. That's an unmet need, and you identify a new target, and the wheel starts over. But what's happening in the middle of this wheel, these are our data scientists, and they're the ones that are making all of this happen. So how do we elevate our practice of data science? That's what I've spent actually, dedicated the last couple of years of my professional life to. How do we enable our data scientists to meet these big challenges and to have an impact on the world around us? We're thinking of this in terms of 3 pillars, right? So we want to have the correct tools and partners. We talked about that yesterday. We want dynamic career choices and opportunities to expand, continuous education, And we want to connect all of our data scientists across this huge organization and all these different business functions and create a sense of community. So Shahram and Chris were on stage yesterday. I mean, I think we talked about AN Pharma. It's not just the tools that a company like, say, Microsoft could bring, but it's the world-class expertise and the different backgrounds that they can come in and help us to internalize, operate in a new culture and new ways of working. I'm very happy to say that at Novartis we kicked off a number of signature moments this year with respect to, just kind of bringing our data scientists together. We had our first internal One Novartis Data Science Conference. Our CEO opened it. We had 700 plus people, so basically we sold out the venue, right? But this was a mix of data scientists, in-person, virtual, but also our key business partners wanting to know more about data science. We had a data science marketplace. We had over 200 abstracts submitted of people wanting to be on stage and give talks. Shortly after, we wanted to enable new ways of coming together and collaborating, innovating together. This is the One Novartis Data Science Challenges with Professor Andrew Lowe at MIT, and we're trying to really identify what are the key drivers behind clinical trial successes and failures from historical data. And we also had at one of our premier, the signature leadership events of the company, we invited 30 hands-on data scientists this year. They actually in real time, and there's people from EPFL as well, tried to solve an actual business problem and just demonstrate, make sure all of our senior leadership could see what value a data scientist can bring even in a short amount of time. And that brings us to the third pillar, which is careers and education aspect. This year we unveiled a Data Science Academy. I think we're the first organization to offer online masters via Coursera to various academic institutions. And I've had many interesting chats with Laura, who you saw on stage as well, and we're hoping to expand this to Switzerland as well. And beyond the Data Science Master, we just want at people's fingertips access to things like Coursera and Udacity for cutting-edge courses, and really try to bring people with similar interests together to do this jointly, to capture their experience and make this reproducible and modular. And the last thing that I'm quite proud of is our AI for Life residents. And there you can talk to them at the booth. That's what they look like, standing next to Shahram. This program is meant to take, for example, recent graduates or people with solid technical foundation, maybe theoretical machine learning knowledge, and give them experience, hands-on applying this to health. How can you make an impact? What would a career in health look like, and how would you get started, right? And on that note, I want to finish by talking about just the 3 areas where they'll be working in this over the next year. And hopefully next year we'll see some of them on stage instead of me. So. What you see here is a histopathology slide, and as the colors come in, it's classifying different types of cell types. Now, in the literature, and this is actually something a physician would do, is you look at how the cells look like, and it enables you to make a machine or a human prediction on the prognosis for a given patient. This is plenty AI enough, right? But can we go beyond this? What's really driving the shape of cells, and say in cancer, is the underlying mutations to the molecular behaviors, the transcriptomics underneath. Can we actually predict that? And we have such data, but it's not easy to generate, right? But could we predict that from a histopathology slide? Conversely, you still need a biopsy to get an image like this. Can you actually take a non-invasive technology like MRIs and predict what and replace what the invasive image would have looked like? Can we interconvert between these different data modalities through some latent feature space that is, capturing similar bits of information? On the digital endpoint space, this is one of my favorite examples because I think even the data set is quite cool. But we can capture how a patient's walking around their own home. Now the question for the audience is, okay, what are we trying to predict here in this patient? And probably, I would imagine it would be like some sort of mobility, but it's actually a cognitive load, how stressed out someone is. And as you see us pace around the stage here, maybe this makes a little bit of sense, right? But I think it's a nice example of how you bringing together data from different modalities, capturing different aspects of of a person, can objectify the subjective. It can create a more holistic picture, And you can even imagine, one of these could simply be how a patient's feeling, and how does that correspond to, what you're observing. Shahram yesterday, and here's the last example, Shahram talked about the vastness of chemical space. And we talked about, due to human nature, how we tend to go to areas of this space where we're familiar with, where we know how to make the compounds, where we know how to get to. So can we use our vast amount of chemical knowledge to help us navigate this place, to get to different parts of it where we can provide value? How do we do that? So, there's a lot of questions I think we're trying to answer. First, probably we don't want to steer around chemical space, we want to navigate in the latent feature space. Immediately you could ask, okay, do you want to use a variational autoencoder? Do you want to use a GAN to get there? Once you get there, you need a space to be able to predict physical properties of the molecules. That's your compass anyway. And it doesn't have to be continuous. Do we need reinforcement learning to learn how to find the optimal points in space? Alternatively, we could actually shape the space differently, right? We could bring in different bits of information, the chemical assays in the beginning, to make it more continuous. That also sounds quite cool, right? Except that would come at the cost of generalizability when you want to apply this to different projects. And speaking about projects, the big question is, how do we ensure that the chemists and the people making the decisions in which handful of molecules to bring to the clinic have confidence in our system? So we're going to need to create basically a map of the stars, right? And show them, okay, this is where you're typically thinking about which molecules you should be using that have shown to be, hit your target. But if you let us guide you, we can bring you to places that you haven't considered, right? And maybe we even show them how to get there in reality and propose AI retrosynthesis routes and so on. This is a hard problem. That's why it's one of those we're working on with Microsoft. On that note, we're not, we're going to have a mentor from both Microsoft and Novartis on this to see how valuable this can be on this residence project. And remember, we're not doing this to deliver data science. This is about launching a career in understanding what a career could look like in health, kickstarting your career, increasing your network, and giving you experience how to transition from a more theoretical discipline to working and understanding what a challenging, meaningful, and impactful place health could be to spend your career and your life's work in. Please scan that QR code. It'll actually take you to a place where you can request information on various ways of getting started and what it could mean to you, from residents to more senior positions. So thank you very much. Come see us at the booth.